Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeremy Heater-Druitt, Development Program Manager for the Residential Tax Incentive Program. Welcome to the 2024 annual meeting of the Residential Housing Council. Present, we have Janice K. Shanklin and Steve Gladman. We may have more members join as the meeting progresses. In the audience, we have a good deal of city staff. I do want to call out the core team, at least, Talisa Monaghan, Heidi Ferguson, and David Parrish, who joined us back in October. For the benefit of the public who may be watching this after the recording is published on city channels, this body is established under Ohio Revised Code to review the activity of the City of Columbus Residential Tax Incentive Program by way of its community reinvestment areas. Any community reinvestment area or CRA in the state needs a housing council to oversee it. This body oversees the ones managed by the City of Columbus. On the board currently, you have the current roster of members. There are a total of 5. Steve Gladman, present. Maud Hill, not present. Deborah Diggs, not present. Lois Carson, not present. And Janice K. Shanklin, who is present. As a reminder for this body and for the public who may be watching this, this program does not just offer residential projects the opportunity to get a tax abatement on the property, but we do also require certain affordability metrics depending on the project scope. So prior to 2018, if a residential construction project, whether new build or a renovation project, were in a CRA that the city established, they could get the property tax abatement without these added requirements. This is before 2018. Now, so starting in 2018, Council began adding affordability requirements to the program, and in that 2018 policy that we refer to it as, the affordability requirements were targeted more on the multifamily rental side. And the city also divided all the CRAs into 3 tiers based on economic vitality, recognizing that different neighborhoods need different things with housing. So on the top end of the spectrum, you have market ready. These are communities that are built out. They have a great deal of investment, maybe not a lot of affordability. That may include neighborhoods like the Short North, 5th by Northwest, Kennedy and Henderson. The middle tier, ready for revitalization, neighborhoods that are either on the middle of the economic spectrum or they're up and coming. Neighborhoods like this include Near East or South Side. And the most economically distressed tier, the one that we want to focus a lot of investment in, is ready for opportunity. That includes neighborhoods such as Linden or Franklinton. In 2018, like I mentioned, the affordability requirements were targeted on the multifamily rental side, and that was specific to market ready and ready for revitalization, so the upper 2 tiers out of the 3. In the 2018 policy, that primarily meant that projects would need to set aside 10% of their units to renters earning 80% or lower of AMI, and an additional 10% to those earning 100% or lower of AMI. There's various credits as well that are part of the program in the 2018 policy. There was a home ownership requirement in 2018 for market ready specifically, but the way that was structured was too restrictive to make a project happen. That was one change that happened in the 2022 policy that I'll get to into in a moment. Fast forward to 2022, Council legislated some updated affordability requirements. The challenge was to go deeper and wider on the affordability as far as rental project is concerned. So if you take a hypothetical multifamily project, say in the Short North, in the 2018 policy, that project would have been required to provide the 10% of units at or below 80% AMI and 10% at or below 100% AMI. In the 2022 policy, for that same hypothetical project, those AMI categories are dropped by 20 percentage points. So now it would be 10% of units at or below 60% AMI and 10% at or below 80% AMI. That was the deeper option. There's a new wider option as well for wider affordability, and that means 30% of units at or below 80% AMI. So what I just described is relevant for the market ready and ready for revitalization tier. Ready for opportunity, whereas in 2018 had no affordability requirements whatsoever, we are beginning to phase in those requirements into ready for opportunity. They're doing 10% at 80, 10% at 100, so it's not as deep, not as wide as the upper two tiers, but we are starting to build in this affordability to make sure that these units remain affordable to folks in that neighborhood. Another change in 2022 is home ownership affordability requirements. This is being structured as for an owner-occupant dwelling, which that can be a single-family home, it can be a condo unit, it can be a duplex unit. That family needs to earn at or less than 120% of AMI in order to qualify for the abatement. There's also a calculation that their expenses can't exceed 35%, their housing expenses can't exceed 35% of their overall expenses. We also, in 2022, reformed the fee in lieu. That is a structure where, depending on the style of project, depending on which of the three tiers you're in, a owner or developer can either provide the units or provide a fee in lieu of those units. So we reformed those calculations in 2022. And one other change with this new policy is that we removed a lot of the architectural requirements that were relevant in 2018. So for market ready, there were certain requirements about height, certain requirements about design build. We got rid of that in order to not have the program conflict with building and zoning services. Last big change to highlight here is that in 2018 for market ready, there used to be a ramping up of payments to the school board starting in year 11 out of 15 of the abatement. That was done away with as well in the 2022 update. It's too early to say the effect of this new policy. There was a long period of time that we intentionally established between the point of legislation to the point where these rules truly became effective. So this was legislated, I believe, in July of 2022. And so for projects that had all their required permits issued by August 31 of 2023, so a little more than a year, if you got your permits issued in time, you could use the old rules. The intention here is that we didn't want to pull the rug out from projects that were already in the process of being financed, already had done a lot of legwork. But for projects that get their permits issued September 1 or later, they are subject to these new 2022 rules. We have not approved an application under the new rules yet. So the true effect of this policy is not yet known. I imagine by the next Housing Council meeting, we'll at least have some preliminary data. Any questions on the affordability policy?
I have two. The single-family requirements, are they producing many units? Are we seeing very many single-family units being brought on at those price at 120?
It's hard to say right now. The only data we have is on applications received. And even then, they haven't been, well, to talk about the process a little bit, what we're going to be doing is signing CRA agreements with each individual property owner or developer that's doing those single family units. And then that'll be earlier on in the process. Toward the end of the process, we'll file a restrictive covenant on the property to ensure that property remains affordable for the full 15 years. But all I have right now is information on the received projects that we think will fit into that bucket. Until a CRA agreement is executed, that's not truly set in stone. It's very, very preliminary data, but I imagine as the year goes on, we'll have more. Of course, I know next year you won't be on the board, unfortunately. But at this point in time, I don't have good data on it.
The other question I had is, when you dropped the architectural requirements, did you see a reduction in cost, development costs for those units?
I'm uncertain how it affected the development cost. I will say dropping those requirements really helped with administration. There were a good amount of projects that got snared in that, where they were fully compliant with what building and zoning services needed, but they weren't compliant with what this program needed. and we don't want to be more restrictive than building and zoning services. So I don't have a good dollar amount to describe there, but I will say it made projects getting through this program, it helped them, it helped us.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions? So here is our legislative update for all legislation that happened in 2023. I'm going to briefly describe the top half of this chart because the bottom half of this chart pretty quickly overrides what happened in the top half. So in July of 2023, we did 5 different pieces of CRA legislation. We amended the Southeast CRA, the Far South, and Far West Broad CRAs. They were all amended. These were existing CRAs. And those amendments were either to adjust a boundary to incorporate more parcels, or it was to formally incorporate annexed parcels that were within the existing boundary. When the city annexes a parcel, that does not mean it inherently is added to a CRA, even if it's within the given boundary of a CRA. The CRA itself still needs to be amended to incorporate that annexation. So that's why we do this in certain circumstances for annexation issues. We also created 2 new CRAs back in July. That's the Crosswoods CRA, which is in the far north in the Crosswoods neighborhood near Worthington. And we created the West Scioto CRA, which is about northwest of Franklinton, southeast of Hilliard. Once we passed all that legislation, the Department of Development went through a review of how we're treating the geography of this program. And that led to what we call the Columbus Housing CRA, which had an accompanying fee schedule amendment and a Chapter 4565 amendment. But on the next slide, I'll dig deeper into what that change means. But on the face of it, any questions? On the face of it, any questions about the legislation that occurred last year? And I'll dig deeper into Columbus Housing CRA. So this is the total CRA map that was active as of December 31, 2023. So we made new legislation December 11th. It didn't go into effect until January 10th. So this is what was true the last day of the calendar year that the board is reviewing right now. So keep this image in your head. The dark gray is City of Columbus corporate boundary is not part of a CRA. The very light is outside of the corporate boundary. So we went from this, and then on January 10th, we went to this. So this almost tripled the eligible geography of the program. What we did is we wanted to expand the geography across as much of the city as we could. There were a couple key policy priorities that drove this, in no particular order. One was a concern over geographic concentration of affordability. We did not want to set an expectation or even make an appearance of trying to drive affordability to very specific neighborhoods. From an equity lens, we wanted to disperse this as widely across our geography as we could. Another policy priority here was market certainty. To create a new CRA, it takes about 3 or 4 months to get through all the legislation, the housing survey, and other matters. And the CRAs were often created as needed to support certain neighborhoods. And so to get out of the game of having to engineer a legislative timeline to support certain parts of our city, we wanted to get out in front of that activity and just do the expansion all in one fell sweep as far as we could. A last benefit I'll mention here is ease of administration. With 31 different CRAs on that prior chart, it becomes administratively quite difficult to manage as the program grew. Each CRA has its own batch of guiding ordinances. Each one has state compliance, which is due on every year. And so to simplify matters, the Columbus Housing CRA absorbed just about all those. And we now have one ordinance. In the future, if we amend this thing, it'll just be one batch of ordinances guiding the vast majority of the program. We do have some carve-outs. You'll notice the gray area. You also notice like a gray area with a dashed hex through it. The dark gray without any other notation, that's corporate boundary that is not in this program at all. The reasons those might be carved out are a mix of the existence of a commercial CRA. So for example, in the very bottom around Rickenbacker, there's the Rickenbacker commercial CRA. We did not want to override that. There could be an active TIF, tax increment financing, on a parcel, and we didn't want to harm the service payments of a given parcel with an abatement, so certain areas were carved out due to that. We carved out the legacy CRAs. These are CRAs that are either a pre-94 CRA, which carries a special legal distinction that prevents us from amending those more than 2 times. That also includes the Easton Residential CRA, which is not a pre-94, but it does have contractual obligations that prevent us from amending it until, I believe, 2028 or 2027. The last one was Short North. We kept that CRA intact, the reason being the Short North CRA has a commercial component. And so although we think about it as primarily a residential CRA and it lives in this program with this team, because of the commercial component, we kept Short North intact to help support both residential and commercial in that part of the city. We did keep also the 3-tier designation, market ready through ready for opportunity, but now they're based on census tracts. So this helps to right size the economic indicators, and this is, I would say, a 4th big policy priority for this expansion. What tended to happen is when CRAs got larger and larger, they would lose the neighborhood fluctuations within it. For example, the South Side CRA had all 3 tiers within it if you went by census tract. So by getting rid of the old CRAs, this helps to illuminate which areas of the city need what, and to do that in a more targeted way. So this went live January 10. So any project that is completed January 10 or later will be subject to this geography. Any project completed prior to January 10 is subject to the old geography. As far as impact, one thing I will say is that applications received so far are up 45% compared to last year. That increase may taper down as the year goes on after the initial excitement about this expansion occurs, but I think that does speak to the popularity of the program and the need to help bring down housing costs that, as this board well knows, are impacted by interest rates, construction costs, and other factors. Are there any questions on this expansion in the map?
I just have one question.
Yeah.
So the ideal situation would be that this works and that the areas that are ready for opportunity would develop more housing, become more prosperous, and then would maybe move up to the next level, ready for revitalization or to market. What's the process to review those areas to see if the economics have changed and they should be reclassified, changing their affordability targets?
Yeah, so this program is required to undergo a 3-year review, a triennial review. That next review is due by July 31 of 2025, so a little over a year from now. So really between now and then, council and the department will be reviewing the program, including those area designations and the economic factors that go into it. So the soonest that the actual area designations of each census tract would hypothetically change would be as soon as summer next year. Do you have any questions on the map? Okay. Okay, I'm going to take a pause and invite up Mark Lundeen, who is our Economic Development Administrator, and he's going to talk about the downtown CRA. The way we manage the residential CRAs, downtown exists outside of the core team and lives more with the Economic Development team. I'll hand it over to Mark.
Thank you. Happy to be here today. Good to see everyone. The downtown CRA has continued to be a critical development tool for the city. Over the past year, we've seen prominent use of the tool, especially on the eastern side of downtown, and it has definitely skewed more towards residential development. For the last year, we had 500 units split amongst 8 buildings, and again, focused around your Topiary Park area is where we've seen the most development. the Vera on Broad, Library Park, the Abigail, 530 East Ridge Street have all opened over there, and it's kind of growing residential neighborhood. As we continue to use the downtown CRA, we're looking forward to additional conversions of potential office buildings that we'll see come online this year, such as the Continental Center, and others are being evaluated. The PNC Plaza just opened as well. So we're seeing a mixture of multifamily development, some again in these large buildings, but a lot of smaller projects as well. And generally, they've included affordable components. An example would be the Finance Fund, which just opened the Vera on Broad. It's 114 affordable units with a mixture between 60 and 120% of AMI. There is a mixed-use component to it with a small amount of retail, and 65% of the units are studios or one-bedrooms to service the student population. You know, as typical with multifamily, it's amenity-focused. Things like community kitchens or community spaces, outdoor recreation, exercise. You know, we've seen an increase in that component. Also, it also tends to be a mixed-use project, again, right now with retail, but we've seen co-working space and other kinds of uses associated with the development. In 2023, we saw $160,104,921 in investments in the downtown area. And again, we expect that to continue largely with residential projects in 2024. Questions on the downtown CRA?
Mark, are you concerned with the absorption rate that's currently downtown for rental and interest rates and the lack of retail demand impacting development, at least in the short term, for additional housing?
Yeah, great question. We're just city workers, so we're always concerned about everything, generally, Steve. But I would say that we delivered a disproportionate number of units downtown over the last 2 years. And so it will take some time to absorb those units, but that's nothing out of ordinary in the market, right? We see absorption is pretty stable. It just relates to the number of units that were delivered the last couple of years. Any other questions? All right, thank you so much.
I'm going to highlight a couple important data points I thought were important to include in this meeting. There's a lot more data I could share, so if you do have a particular question, if I don't have an answer to it, I might be able to get you one. So outside of the downtown CRA, I carved downtown out of this data because it is a joint residential and commercial CRA, so I'm trying to focus on the core program here with this data. So there's about 3,217 abated parcels. This data is all valid as of year-end 2023, by the way. So as of December 31, 2023, this is what has been occurring in the program. Per the Franklin County Auditor, the combined appraised / market value of every abated parcel through the program is about 2.6, 2.7 billion. That's not to say that that's the entire value that is abated. That's saying that any project whatsoever, any property that has an abatement on it, this is the cumulative appraised market value of those properties. The abatement value, which is that third line, this is the property taxes that are abated on an annual basis. Right now, that number is about 45.1 million. In terms of the affordability, this program monitors currently 166 units at 60% AMI, 482 units at 80% AMI, and 239 units at 100% AMI. Outside of the units that this program is required to monitor, which we do monitor that on an annual basis, this program also does a lot to support affordable projects that, for various reasons, may not be monitored by the program. A good example of this would be a LIHTC, low-income housing tax credit project in a Ready for Opportunity area. Because in 2018 we didn't require any affordability, that's not going to show up in the monitored category. So we do track LIHTC units separately because a lot of these are not monitored by the program. So far, 752 LIHTC units have been supported by this program. And while each unit can vary in terms of what specific AMI that family is, these will average out to around 60% of AMI. And so far, in terms of the fee in lieu units, and again, those are units that were affordable units required, but the developer pursued the fee in lieu option to fulfill that requirement. That is 224 units, and the total cost is $1.1 million. That cost is the actual fee that the developers pay. In the 2018 policy, the developer could choose an eligible housing CDC for that money to go to. In the 2022 policy, we not only reformed the amounts that the fee in lieu is calculated on, but also the designee. Those monies will now go to the city in a fund to support affordable housing initiatives. Do you have any questions on this data or any other data that's not on this chart you may be interested in?
The developers that are choosing the fee in lieu, are those typically smaller projects, or is it just all types of projects?
I feel it's across the board. Sometimes, I'm just speaking based on experience with working with certain applicants, smaller developers, if they do go for the fee in lieu, and a lot of them do the affordable units, but if they choose the fee in lieu, they may not have experience in monitored affordability. They may not have experience with HUD. They may not have experience with the added administration of monitoring those units. That might be one reason. For larger developers, if they were to choose a fee in lieu, they may have run the numbers and decided that the fee in lieu is cheaper than providing the units. That might be a reason. But I would say you do see it across the board, across various sizes of project. People will choose the affordable units or the fee in lieu for differing reasons.
I have a question in regards to the 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom AMI. What does that look like for the percentages?
Yeah, I can share with you after the meeting by email the chart, because we do have a chart, and that chart, the information is guided by HUD, the HUD Home program specifically. And so we do require the rent and the income to meet those particular AMI thresholds. There is also a required utility allowance. There's various ways a developer can calculate that, and we have some guidance in our rulemaking about that. But hypothetically, if a unit based on the AMI had to be rented at $1,000, the developer estimates the utilities at $200, they can only charge $800. Any more questions on the data? So this text is a little small to read. I apologize. This came out of a much larger spreadsheet that I tried to whittle down as much as I could. So this is one of the main areas of work for this board, and that is the inspection findings. So every January through February, typically, the housing tech team will go out into the community and do a physical inspection of every abated property that has an active abatement through the program. And they're looking for signs of physical deterioration. One clarification to make here is that this is not necessarily one-to-one with the code violation. The Ohio Revised Code does care about things like aesthetics, maintaining the aesthetics of a property, make sure it's well presented. And so this does go a little bit further than just code violations. You'll see in the issues column toward the right and in your packet, you'll see a mix of things. Sometimes it's peeling paint, sometimes it's a concrete step that's busted. And so what we do is, with your vote to approve this, we will issue letters to the owners of this list of properties, which I believe the count is 23 this year, 23 findings. In that letter, we'll include what the finding was. It'll include a reasonable amount of time to fix it. then the owner can submit that evidence by way of a photo of the fixed work. They can also send an invoice or work order showing that the work was completed. Or in the case of no contact at all, which that can happen too, then we do another physical inspection. So every year there tends to be a handful that are a little unusual. So beyond the issues that are in black and white there's two properties in particular I want to highlight. One of them is 83 Eureka. That is a repeat finding from last year. And so what we'll do is we will issue another letter this year, but that letter will be more final. This is the last chance for the owner to communicate with us or fix the property. If not, then we do have the ability to revoke the abatement. The other unusual one here is 212 North Guilford. This is a home in Franklinton that was a building, was a home upon application approval to get the abatement. Something happened in the meantime since abatement approval, and that home no longer exists. We don't know why. So the abatement is technically still on the parcel, but it's not abating anything because there's no structure anymore to abate. So this letter will be handled very differently. There's nothing for the homeowner to repair. So this will be informing the owner that we are revoking the abatement because the structure no longer exists.
For the two properties that you just spoke with, is it, when you end the abatement, is it just going forward, or is there any clawback for non-compliance, especially if there's no structure there anymore and they've received some benefit?
Good question. So there is no clawback. If we were to revoke the abatement on a given property, that would be a forward-looking revocation in this specific context for these kinds of findings. This does work a little bit differently when a project has monitored units. So a very different scenario, let's say a developer committed to 10 affordable units, an interannual check, they fall short of that 10. There is a certain cure period. There are certain penalties, the final penalty being the revocation of an abatement. But in this specific context, this would be revoking it for the future. The abatement they already got, they keep. Unless there's any other questions, what I would request next is a vote by the board to authorize us to issue those letters and help get these properties remedied. I will also mention that in that letter, we do include resources for the homeowner. That way, if they do need financial resources or other assistance to help bring the property up, there's other programs within the city and other external partners that they can work with too.
I would vote to approve based on the staff's recommendation.
I would vote to approve as well.
All right, thank you both. I did want to mention too, I mean, you did just conclude the vote. My apologies. I do have a whole listing of all the photos of these findings. If you want me to send that to you later, happy to do so. I think I did send it in an earlier batch of emails to you both. But if you do want to review the actual photos, those are available. That is the end of the core presentation. Do either of you have any questions?
I have no additional questions.
All right. Any questions from the audience? All right. So with that, thank you everyone for attending and for your attention. This concludes the annual meeting.